So I'm going to go through a little bit of what an FTA does at an in-person event versus what you are going to be doing at a remote event. There is a pretty large difference between what happens. It's mostly about what you don't have to worry about, which is great for you. But there are some things you need to pay attention that we will be doing differently. So at an in-person event, the FTA manages with the robot setup and driver station setup during the pre-match section. It also deals with robot troubleshooting during the match, in case that ever happens, hopefully not. I also manage scorekeepers and CSAs, as well as I'm in charge of Wi-Fi security and stability. What all you have to deal with is making sure the robot gets set up and the driver station is set up properly, as well as robot troubleshooting. Nothing else needs to worry about you, just because of how the rest of the things are played into the rest of the event. Now, before I go further, I'm going to preach yet again the Slack. All of the presenters here are in Slack, as well as some other people that work behind the scenes at events, like volunteer coordinators. We have a huge amount of resources available in Slack, meaning text person, say, hey, what's up with this? Now you may have an almost immediate reply, potentially, with what you should be doing to fix it. Now, that's not to say you should be using the Slack as an on event or in immediate time support problem, saying, oh, I'm mid-match, what's wrong? It's not exactly the best idea. You also have, as Mickey mentioned with the ref manual, you have the FTC FTA manual and the FTC CSA manual. Both of these manuals are really, really helpful in understanding diagnosing problems, as well as how you should be conducting the flow of troubleshooting. The other part is the Rev Robotics troubleshooting guide, because you're either going to be using a control hub or an expansion hub, and more often than not, the problem you're going to be finding is in there. So Rev has a fantastic troubleshooting guide saying, watch this LED blink like this, and it's going to be this problem. They're fantastic. Highly recommend them if any other vendors are going to be basing their troubleshooting off of that. Now, what to look for and when. Before the match, you want to watch for trouble connecting to the robot. In the expansion hub, this means you actually need to turn your robot on. You can connect to the phones and have the phones pair correctly, but without having the expansion hub on and powered, you're not actually going to have your robot move. That's a big thing that we had at provincials last year, and it's probably going to be a thing that you're going to have at least once or twice. The second part is the robot not initializing properly. If your robot doesn't initialize in the sense of your sensors aren't reset or anything like that, check how your code is handling your init and see what that goes through. The third part you want to watch out before is controllers not recognized or giving input. The biggest error we find is wires, or whether that be inside of a USB hub or that's on your robot side. Wires are generally the basis of most problems. Either swap out a USB hub or do some other stuff like that. If you have a control hub, you'll have a little bit of a different flow for that, because you no longer have to worry about the wires connected to the expansion hub from the phone, which is a huge lifesaver. Your robot also won't turn on and connect to it if you don't have power to it. During the match, you want to watch for delay between joystick input and your robot moving. If you notice that this is like a visual delay, like you move it and then there's some time and then your robot moves, there's some potentially issues going on. We can poke around in Slack about what's actually the problem there. If your robot stops responding or disconnects, that's a very common issue that you can have happen, whether that's a wire coming loose or other issues. Pay attention to them, watch your drive team, watch the robot, see what happens. The third one is a little bit kind of hard to quantify, but anything you don't expect your robot to do. If your robot is going forwards when it's supposed to be going backwards, or your robot is moving when you're not telling it to move, all of these things are things that FTA should poke around with, or the person acting as an FTA should poke around with. Now, we just covered what to do. Here's what not to do. After the match start, no one can touch the robot unless it's a safety issue. This is mostly to alleviate any concerns of, oh, well, they touched it, then they did something else to affect the output of the robot. Now, if an emergency occurs, like the robot catches fire, or your battery catches fire, or your robot runs out of the arena and tries to kill someone, first you should check if Skynet is installed. The second thing is contact Dave Ellis, because Dave may be able to help you and give you a bit more information if that was a real match. Now, in the FTA manual, a large component of it is about replays. Replays are not eligible in remote play whatsoever. Now, this is mostly due to the fact that an FTA cannot give 100% certainty at a remote event whether or not there was the circumstances surrounding a replay that actually happened. It means, unfortunately, every match you play for real is for real. Good news, you have more than one. Now, the last thing I want to talk about just before I poke Slack even further is, next slide, something that will save your pain more often than not, which is called rubber duck debugging. I have to say probably 75% of the problems I have encountered in FTC, and probably about half of them in FRC, are due to programming. Now, this isn't saying that you need to understand programming 100%, but it does mean that your programmers need to explain to a literal rubber duck each line of code going through it every single step of the way. Now, what this does is it says, okay, I'm going to read out and explain what this line does. This makes your brain cognitively think, okay, is that actually what I want it to do? And it kind of covers the, oh, well, that was dumb kind of mistake, where you're seeing, well, that's right in front of me. I was scrolling around for 15 minutes. I couldn't find the problem. Where you have a positive one instead of a negative one, or some other issue related to control flow or something else. And all of these things I've poked around, a little bit brief though, I can dive into a ton of depth. If you have any questions, please go onto the Slack, poke me in the channel for FTC. There's a ton of information that we can go through and see what else we can find.